This week's episode is sponsored by the Media Insider, where small businesses learn how to communicate like pros. Here's your Media Minute. Clarity builds trust. Your message isn't just what you say, it's how you make people feel. When you're clear and consistent, your audience knows what to expect and starts to trust you. Learn how to build that clarity into your business story at themediainsider.co. Brand strategy without the big price tag. Hello, listener. You know those writers whose words literally shape how we live? Public notices, policy briefs, the fine print that keeps a community running? For years, Janice Cummings O'Mahony was one of them. She wrote for government agencies and civic projects where every word had to be factual, clear, and airtight. And then she did something beautifully unpredictable. She crossed the line from policy to poetry. Now her sentences don't just inform, they breathe. At this point in my intro, you may be thinking, don't know if I really want to get into poetry on my way to work or while I'm cooking dinner. I suggest you keep listening. Janice does not wax poetic. See what I did there? Let me describe her this way. She's not your average poet, and she doesn't care for Mary Oliver, if you know who that is. Her collection, Raise Your Hand If You Hear My Voice, is part memory, part witness, and all heart. In this conversation, Janice shares what she carried over from her policy career, the discipline, the empathy, the precision, and how she learned to loosen her grip enough to let language sing. Her greatest thrill is when she sees a response that tells her, I get this, and it speaks to me. She loves to write poems that make the reader chuckle and definitely adds a bit of snark, my kind of gal. Janice also has a deep appreciation for those in the military. She grew up with her father being in the Air Force and participating in 3 wars. You will thoroughly enjoy her poem D-Day that she reads to us. We'll talk about what happens when a rulebook writer learns to write for residents instead of regulation, and why her years of crafting government documents might just be the best training ground a poet could have. You can buy her book locally at Moonraker in Langley, Kingfishers in Coopville, Village Books in Bellingham, and it is also in Snow Isle, Seattle, and King County libraries. By the way, Janice also co-wrote Whidbey Island Reflections on People and the Land, which is a book on local land use approaches. Let's meet your local poetry maven, Janice. Hi, Janice.
Hi, Megsy.
I am so glad to be in your lovely home. What a beautiful neighborhood.
Thank you. Yeah, and what a beautiful autumn day, my favorite season.
Me too. I'm an October person, a baby, and I love fall. It's my favorite time of the year.
Yeah, best time of the year for sure. The more rain, the better.
Well, I don't agree with you with that one. Actually, you know what? I could deal with the rain. It's the wind because I live on a bluff. The wind is crazy town. So let's get into this. This is so interesting talking to you and also hearing your story. And so we're going to do a deep dive here. All right.
Sounds good.
All right. So you spent years writing public policy materials where every word had to be precise and clear, correct?
Yes.
Yes. So what made you decide to shift from that world to writing poetry? That's a big leap.
Yeah, that's true. My public policy writing was in the criminal justice area.
Wow.
So there were a lot of complicated issues and a lot of controversy. People think they know what they think about those things.
Okay.
And so I got better and better after 25 years. I started out like a lot of people, overwriting, redundant, using acronyms. And it became clear to me that I wasn't doing my job because the average citizen had no idea what we in the public sector were talking about.
So they would just stop reading.
Well, it was condescending. It was kind of like, if you don't
You're not as smart as we are.
Yeah, you're not as smart as we are. And if you don't get that, it's your problem, not our problem. Well, I think it was our problem.
Okay.
So I started honing it down a lot. I learned that people can retain about 3 things in any given interaction. They can learn about 3 things. So I would focus on that, took out all acronyms, got really crystal clear. And that sort of was the ramp that led me to poetry.
So was there a specific moment or experience that said, hey, it's time to write for myself now?
Yes, I have been saved my whole life by reading books, libraries. I think anyone who loves books secretly thinks they might be a writer. I'm not sure if that's true, but I think that could be true. I had always intended to do some writing for myself. And it did take a while to drop that public sector language and move over to more vulnerability, more emotional honesty. And the way I did it is I started out writing 100-word short stories for the discipline of brevity.
Let me tell you, not that this is about me, what I had to do. In high school, I thought I was going to be a writer and go to school for writing. But I had tested really high in business and technology. I took an AP class in writing, and our teacher would submit our writings for contests, and I won all the time. Well, after years and years and years of technical writing, I couldn't hardly describe, if I had to describe your hair, I would just call it the color and that it was short. I couldn't even describe anything anymore because of technical writing. So I took a narrative writing class before I started this podcast in Seattle. So I could get back to that, being able to write a narrative.
It's very much being multilingual. I mean, there's style and vocabulary and aesthetics in every field of writing. It's really different. And you can get rusty on certain things.
Yes. Even when I was reading a book, if there was a sentence that was too descriptive, I would just skip it because it was irritating to me because I was so used to that choppy tech language. So policy writing and then poetry. So poetry has structure, rhythm, and even word choice. How did any of your policy writing influence poetry, or did you just have to totally flip it?
I had to immigrate to a new world. And what I wanted to do is the value in public policy writing is to sort of educate and build consensus and reach agreement and advocate. I wanted to delight people. I wanted it to be more fun and to engage imaginations. And I really wanted to connect with the reader. So that's the reason the name of this book is Raise Your Hand If You Hear My Voice. I want it to be mutual. I want it to be a relationship.
Let's just name some things thinking about it. So if someone's saying, okay, this is me, I have to get out of my profession and how I've had to write. What did you have to unlearn?
I had to take off my game face. Okay. So the game face is I'm the professional. And my job is to educate you about, for example, juvenile prostitution and the change in policy that we need.
And here's a poem about it. Just kidding.
No, that might be a poem. So I have to convince you as a voter, I have to convince you and advocate that after years of calling juvenile prostitutes criminals and having our response to them be to arrest them and to detain them, what if we thought about them as child sex abuse victims, which they are?
They are.
And how about if we target and criminalize the people that are abusing them? The customers, the motel owners, the pimps. How about that shift? But that's a big shift for people, when they've grown up in one world. But you have to be neutral. You have to present the facts. You have to give them why. And in poetry, you can get down to your human connections. Yeah.
All right. You said you write for people who claim they don't get poetry. How do you invite those readers in?
You can do it in two ways. I have found, number one is humor. A lot of my work is kind of snarky, and I think it's funny.
I am so snarky.
Yeah.
I have to cut back on the snark.
No, I think there's not enough snark in the world. So there's humor, but there's also connecting with the way they are in the world. I'm a military brat. I grew up with an Air Force father who was in 3 wars. That was his career. And men, when I write about military issues or fathers, it's like the blinds go up and they are really there. Their emotions about that. If they're veterans, they feel that they're being understood and that things are being respectful. With women, all you need to talk about is parenting or aging, and women are right there.
Children as well.
Children, yes.
So what's your secret to writing poems that are more accessible and that are deeply resonate? Like you just explained how it is to veterans, but for a broader audience.
No fancy words. We're plain English. And as little as possible. So I read the perfect quote, and I can't do it exactly, but it says, perfection is not attained when there's nothing more to add. Perfection is attained when there's nothing more you can take away.
Wow.
And that's my goal. Not one unneeded word.
Yeah. You were speaking about veterans. Do you typically, though, have a reader in mind that you know will get it? Or like you said, if you try to cover everyone, that's like maybe your goal that you get most excited about as someone who would normally wouldn't read poetry?
Right. I've had some amazing experiences since this book came out. A number of friends have had small gatherings where I have asked people to pick the poem that most spoke to them and to read it to me, to read it to all of us and to talk about it. And I've been really surprised at what people picked. Women pick things about the military because it resonates about their dad or their husband.
Right.
Men pick very emotional poems sometimes. So I've been surprised.
Yeah, because it spoke to them.
It spoke to them, and it speaks really deeply.
So I mentioned this narrative writing class that I took and over months. And when we got to a poetry section, I knew I could write poetry. I can. And so that's when I think the most people in the group paid attention, is when I wrote poetry. But one of the things that irritated me about myself is I tend to be very sing-songy. And I did, what do you think about that? Is that something that is a lot of people do that tend to be sing-songy because that's how they see poetry? Or in your book, do you speak about being able just to be plain spoken?
Yes, that's a really interesting comment. So number one, I never say a poem is done until I've read it out loud so I can hear the rhythm of it. And I often catch things that I don't like. But in fact, there is a rhythm to poetry. Da-dum, 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 da-dum. I mean, and just with the line breaks and the punctuation, we're taught how to read and how to breathe into that poem. So I don't think sing-songy is necessarily a bad thing. I mean, it obviously bothered you, but
well, I think it reminds me of being in elementary school and they have you write your first poem that totally, rhymes. Yeah.
Did your work rhyme?
It does. It tends to.
Yeah.
It tends to. It just automatically is in my head when I think of things. And I've tried to do it better, not to always do that. But to me, it's with my age, I feel like I'm writing very immaturely,
Yeah, it's hard. Another quote I love is, writing's easy. Just open a vein and bleed on the page.
And that's the truth. So on the way over here, I was listening to a podcast like I always do. And this person being interviewed was talking about the sandwich generation and how she has kids at home that are in their 20s. And then she also takes care of her parents. So she's being sandwiched. And she was talking about how she's worked through a lot of things by writing and putting things down on the page. And I literally turned it off because a memory came that when I first started staying home with my son when he was a baby, he was like 18 months old. And I was so used to being in the technology industry and having that, stuff to do. I joined a writing group online at the time. This was in the 90s. And they would give you a prompt and then you had to write about it. And then people could give you comments and that kind of thing. And this particular prompt was, everything was going to plan until. And I literally turned this off and I thought, how would if I was speaking on this as not a comedy routine, but something, that people were there to listen, how would I say this differently than how I wrote it? And what I wrote about was the fact that a doctor told me when I was pregnant for the first time that I had a V-shaped pelvis. So that was the prompt. That's how I answered the prompt. Everything was going to plan until I found out I had a V-shaped pelvis. And so you just reminded me that I put that down on the page, but still to this day, I mean, my son is 33 now. I can remember every bit of that in what I said because I put it down on paper.
Yeah. I think it's I think there's, as we talked earlier about the different languages of writing, I think there's a lot of different purposes for it.
Right.
And I had many, many years of my own personal writing, stories, poems, that I never would have considered putting out in the world. I wanted to know kind of what I thought about things. I mean, it's kind of journal writing.
Yeah.
I wanted to get better, as you mentioned about your poetry. You want to get better. You want to get to get your style. And it's a long time and maybe never that people decide they're going to put that stuff out.
Right.
I mean, I think there's tons of writing going on that never sees the light of day beyond that writer. And that's just fine.
So do you get super excited when someone who's not probably in your mindset of these people will get this poem, when someone who wouldn't be?
I love it.
Love it.
That's my favorite.
Yeah.
I love when I'm reading and I hear men laughing.
Okay.
Because it always surprises them. They don't intend to.
Yeah.
And I love when men say, this one made me cry because it made me think of my dad or something like that.
Something
Yeah,
like
I
that.
love that.
So can you share a poem or a line that has sparked that kind of reaction?
Yeah, I sure can. Let's see here. There's a poem in here. Well, there's a couple, and I could give you your choice if you want. There's a poem about the mass shooting in Uvalde, Texas that is quite almost everyone responds to. There's actually one about kids in school. Let me just pick.
Yeah, just pick.
Okay, I'll pick one that every man loves. Okay. I will pick the one. This, again, comes from my military background and my respect for the way men think and their bravery and so on. I mean, do you want me to read this poem?
I do.
This is called D-Day. Jerky combat film shows flotillas, landing boats, millions of tracer rounds, men in bunkers and on beaches, running for their lives, blinded by smoke, dodging shattered helmets floating away in surf, deaf to commands or screams. Behind, on sheltered desks, are carbon copies of orders, lists, inventories, directions, transfers, requisitions. There are acres of trucks and tanks and stretchers, tents and soup vats and pallets of ammo. It is too big to happen, too many moving parts. Yet here it is. Someone had to study the maps and the numbers, master the tides and the weather, learn the enemy, weigh the odds, and say, go. You never knew enough, but one person had to say, today is the day. You hope your people will hold, will swim through, run fast across the sand, climb the cliffs, aim true. You know the hard fate of young men at war, the same ones who snapped to attention as you drove by yesterday, 5-star flag flapping in the cold, salty breeze.
I can picture every bit of that in my head. That's awesome. So detailed.
Well, there's a modern, kind of a current joke, I think, to bash men.
Yeah.
And to tease them and use words like mansplaining and manspreading and, all of that stuff. And kind of go, they can't, they open the refrigerator and they can't find the ketchup. But they have saved us. And their worldview and their bravery. I honor that.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so in your new collection, raise your hand if you hear my voice. There's a quiet confidence in your language in this book. So how did you decide when a poem is clear enough without losing its mystery? Like what you just read.
Have you heard the expression, you have to kill your darlings? I'm trying to remember it. I wrote down, it's Sir Arthur Quiller Couch in 1916 said, he was doing a writing guide, and he said, you must murder your darlings.
Oh, man.
And what that means is every writer, you really fall in love with your words. Right. And you do a stanza or a paragraph and you look at it and you go, that's pretty darn good. I like that. That's pretty funny.
Yeah.
That's pretty cool. And then my editor and I would look at that and she would say, lose stanza 3. And I'm like, no, I don't want to. It's funny. She's like, no, it's a digression, and if you take it out, then your poem gains power. So it's murder your darlings. Take out the words. Take that stanza and put it away. Maybe you can use it another place.
I'm like that too. When I write something that's really funny, man, and every time I read it, I start laughing. It cracks my husband up because he's like, you still think that's funny? I do still think it's funny. Of course.
I do the same thing. I have things in here that really make me laugh.
You're just talking about your editor. Do you approach your poems the same way you did your public policy drafts, in that type of way, with that type of a distinct editor's eye?
Yes, I definitely do. And I'm harder on my poetry than I was. When you're doing prose, you've got a little wiggle room.
Yeah.
You can be a little sloppy. It doesn't have, I mean, you can add an adverb. You can add some extra stuff, a little lace around the edges. But for me, all of that stuff has to come out.
I'm writing a short story book right now, and it's to go with another book I wrote on hosting. And I love to write short stories. And the reason is because you get to an end really quick. You don't have to write forever and that type of thing. And so just researching that and to fill a whole book with short stories is almost like writing a novel, for sure. And your point to the editor's eye, that I was just explaining to my cousin recently about, she wanted to write a book called My Life in Reverse, because it seems like her life has been in reverse since she started being an adult. And she said, I need a ghostwriter. And I said, you know what? Just like you just said, put it down on paper and then give it to someone, even if they're not an editor, that would have an editor's eye. Because like you said, sometimes it's a digression and you don't know it's a digression, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I kind of intrigued you. So you go there. And...
yeah. I might have to send you my short stories.
Yeah. I'd love to read your short story.
Let's break for a short word on supporting our community. Here on Whimby Island, we're known for looking out for one another, and right now, some of our neighbors need us more than ever. Food insecurity is a growing reality for many in our community, including local families, our seniors, and even military households who call this island home. 3 incredible nonprofits are making a difference every single day. Good Cheer Food Bank and Thrift Stores in South Whimby, North Whimby Help House in Oak Harbor, and Whimby Island Nourishes, who make sure kids and teens never go hungry. These organizations rely on community donations to keep their shelves stocked and their doors open. You can help by giving what you can or donating the specific food and supplies they need most. Visit goodcheer.org, northwhimbyhelphouse.org, or whimbyislandnourishes.org to donate today. Together, we can make sure everyone on Whimby has a seat at the table. Okay, so how do you balance emotion and restraint?
I have twice as many poems as are in this volume that I can never publish because they're either they're full of things that I don't want out in the world. Right. They either go too far into kind of poor me, or they are about others, and I can't have those people read those poems. Yeah. So I'm kind of careful about that.
Yeah, I have a couple of poems like that too, that you're like, oh, I wonder if I have my best girlfriends read this. No, I don't know if I really want them to have that about the person I just wrote about. Yes. Or maybe I do.
Yes.
It's hard.
It is hard.
Okay, so is that something, talking about emotion and restraint, that poetry has taught you differently than policy? I'm coming back to the policy because you had such a different life before you started doing this.
Yes, I was in business suits.
Yeah.
Now I'm in kind of jammy-like clothes.
Keep it warm.
Yeah, I consider poetry a discipline. It makes you refine what you think. It makes you, it requires you to decide what you want to say and then to say it in as few words as possible. So it's almost a Zen exercise in a way. Right. And it's good for me because I have a busy mind and a lot of lists and a lot of things to think about. Poetry is just like, okay, be here, look at this, see how good you can make this.
Have you found, off subject, as you get older that your busy mind keeps you from focusing? Because I feel like I'm that way because I've always had a busy mind, where before I could really constrain it, rein it in, get my work done. And now it's just kind of like all over the place.
Like a big herd of chickens.
I know.
No, I fight it all the time.
Okay.
Fight it all the time to be focused on what I'm doing instead of thinking about the 3 things that I, are going to do next or now.
Do you think that Whimby Island, living here, has a role that plays in your creative process?
Yeah, it's interesting. What appeals to me about Whimby Island, and it is reflected in a lot of the poems in here, is the community and both the loving part of that community and the generosity of it, but also some of the problems of it. And some of the problems are deep and angry political divide.
Yep.
The ability of people to be nasty and anonymous online, and why that happens. I'm really interested in class and how we separate from each other based on class and education and money. We don't really talk about it, but there's signs. And so I like to explore that in my writing. There's a poem in this book about the man who lives on the bench. You noticed? So we are sitting just blocks from the big grocery store here in Freeland.
Right.
And right at the entrance to the grocery store is a bench.
Yeah.
And there is a man camped there year round. Big, all of his things are there, and he sleeps there. And sometimes he'll get a little manic and start yelling and everything. And I'm interested in how he is among us and yet so separate.
Yeah.
So I'm much more interested in community interaction and interpersonal. Lots of Whidbey Island poets focus on nature. Yes. Because it's so beautiful. For some reason, some version of poetic dyslexia, I find it very difficult to write about nature. Everything I write about nature starts to sound like cliche.
Yeah.
Herons and piney woods and ocean waves. It all starts to sound like a Hallmark card. Yeah. People do it really well. I don't.
Yeah, I'm kind of in the same boat. I really appreciate it. But so how much can you say more about that cloud or that sunrise or whatever? I mean, so I kind of, I agree with you, to be honest.
Just other things that are not my métier, as we say.
Absolutely. I get that. After a career where clarity was non-negotiable, how does it feel now to explore ambiguity and symbolism and emotion?
It feels like the truth finally.
Okay.
On a deeply human level. I mean, there's politics and policy and the community and trying to do the right thing in the public sector. And that's all honorable work. But poetry moves me over to humanity and my soul and other people's souls.
Yeah. You've said that one of the things that really inspires you or even brings emotion to yourself is when you see someone get it, as far as your poetry goes. So what does that look like to you? What happens in that moment? How do you know someone got it?
There's often an involuntary verbal response, or a pause, or a big, as I mentioned earlier, a big laugh.
Yeah.
So there's just kind of this response that people involuntarily give me that I just love.
That you just love.
Yeah.
At this stage in your life, what does success look like to you when most of your life it was something else?
That is the best question.
Okay.
Because that is a question I have been pondering a lot. You do the work, you edit the work, you get your publisher, you get the book out, you do the readings at the Freeland Library, and what I never stop to ask is, what's my end game?
Yeah.
Once it's out in the world, what do I really want? It's a very weird thing to do all the work associated with getting a book out in the world, but never think about kind of what you're, sort of like when kids apply for college and they do their reach college that they might possibly get, or they do their for sure college, or they do their, and I never did that exercise about what would be the best thing that could happen about this book. I guess, a national fame.
Yeah.
Then you go down to sort of local fame. You go down to selling books at Moonraker in Langley, or Kingfisher in Coopville. It's in Village Books in Bellingham. And that's a really nice thing to have bookstores take your book. So that is a measure of success, if you will. Books are selling. So the question is, how many do you want to sell? What would be the dream? And I can't answer that question. I'm giving that so much thought, though.
Right. Are you afraid, though, that if you set that in your head, that you might be disappointed?
That's probably part of the avoidance. Avoidance is, a really good technique.
That is true. Okay. So one of the things that I like to do is rapid fire questions just for fun. And I think I might even add a few, just because you said that you were a member of the Whidbey Foodie group on Facebook. Yes. And so am I. I think I have some foodie questions. What's the first poem you ever loved? Do you remember?
I do remember.
Okay.
I actually printed it out. It is The Peace of Wild Things by Wendell Berry.
Okay, so read that to us.
Okay, and I was probably about an 8th grader.
Okay. Wow.
When despair for the world grows in me, and I wake in the night at the least sound in fear of what my life and my children's life may be, I go and lie down where the wood drake rests in his beauty on the water and the great heron feeds. I come into the peace of wild things who do not tax their lives with forethought or grief. I come into the presence of still water, and I feel above me the day-blind stars waiting with their light. For a time, I rest in the grace of the world and am free.
Wow, that's impressive for an 8th grader.
I always had a busy mind, and the peace of this and the idea that you don't have to worry so much and that there's a way to relax really appealed to me. And then the most beautiful thing is when I was going through my mom's papers after her death, she had this poem in her papers.
Oh,
and so so the connection with her is also really good.
Yeah, my dad keeps things, especially writing things. And they come in June to stay a month with me. They're in their 80s. And he brought a picture of me framed. And I thought, to the house, I thought, well, that's kind of odd that he'd be a picture of me when I was 3. But the reason is because in the frame on the back, he had put a poem that I did later when I was a little older, and he put it in there. So those kind of things, like when you found that your mom had, is so special.
Nobody loves you like your mama and daddy.
But it's so funny. You were writing, when you were reading that, you said you're in 8th grade. You're talking about snarky earlier. Somebody, I don't know if it was my mother or a girlfriend that gave me a diary when I was in junior high. And I wasn't one to write typical things that girls write in their diaries. I used to literally write things I was not going to do to my children when I had kids.
Oh, so you would remember.
Yes, my poor parents. They weren't horrible parents, but that's what I wrote in there. And I really, really wish that I had that so I could see if I actually did that.
You know what? I bet you're doing most of them.
Totally. Okay. So what's your favorite place on Whidbey Island to write?
I can only write in one place, and that is in my office with the door closed. It's my little cave and my computer and my Google Docs.
Yes.
And my printer.
I get that. I have to be like that. Mm-hmm. All right. So coffee, tea, or wine when you're editing a poem?
So you see my big, gigantic mug of green tea here.
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. And what, three tea bags?
Uh-huh.
Wow.
Yeah.
Because you're drinking a mug of tea.
Exactly. I'm drinking gigantic.
Yeah. Okay. The line or phrase you're most proud of. Can you think of a specific one?
Well, there is a poem in here about the Queen, Elizabeth II. And the opening line of it is, I have wondered about the royal gynecologist.
Oh my gosh. That's hilarious.
And I'm kind of embarrassed to admit that some of my work actually still makes me laugh, and that always makes me laugh.
Yeah, that made me Jeez. Okay. So is there a word you tend to overuse or secretly love?
I never use an adverb. Okay. If there's an ly on the end of a word, it has to go. Poets tend to use and yet, or they'll say so, or they'll say just, sort of these transitional words, or and then. So all of those have to go.
So I have a super bad habit of saying so. And listener, I can't tell you how many times I edit that out that you don't hear. If you feel I say it a lot on these podcasts, I say it even more that you don't know about. It's just a habit, I think.
It's a verbal tick.
Okay.
And it also it gives you a moment to think and get your thoughts together, and it avoids having to say what you really mean. You get there, but...
Yeah, for me, I think it is overly used by me because it's a transition word for sure. Okay. So what's harder to cut, a policy sentence or a poetic line?
Definitely a poetic line.
Okay.
And we talked earlier about digressions and another thing that always needs to be cut and I watch for is what I call an on-ramp, which is you sort of start out and you're going into the poem, but you're not quite there yet. You're approaching it.
Yeah.
You can usually just cut that whole thing out and just get to it.
Right. Just get to it. Mm-hmm. All right. So what's the best part of being retired?
Becoming myself.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of fitting to the job. Mm-hmm. Yeah. That's a good answer.
Yep.
So what surprised you? I just said it again. I just said so. Okay. What surprised you most about publishing your first poetry collection?
2 weeks. For the 2 weeks that this book first came out, I was so frightened. And felt so vulnerable. This is really personal work.
Yeah.
This is me fat. This is me old. This is me with regrets about parenting. This is me being snarky about dinner parties that I go to. So you write it and you get it out there, and then you realize it's out of my control now.
It is.
I don't know who's going to read it. I don't know what people are going to think. I have no idea if anyone will like it.
Yeah.
That surprised me. Again, similar to when you asked me kind of what's your dream about your work, and I can't answer. And that's the most important question. I never even thought about what's going to happen when you get this stuff out there.
Yeah. Yeah,
So,
I get that totally. If you could host a dinner party talking about that with 3 poets, living or gone, who's at the table?
my man, Billy Collins,
Okay.
who wrote a poem that never fails to make me roar with laughter called The Lanyard.
Okay.
So if you've never read it, you should look up
I will.
The Lanyard by Billy Collins, and I promise you'll love it. I love the young woman who's our current National Poet Laureate, Ada Limon. And there is I love Maya Angelou for her power.
Yeah.
Just put it out there.
Yeah, frankness.
Just fearlessness. I'll say something very snarky about the poet Mary Oliver.
Okay.
All right. So Mary Oliver is on most people's favorite.
Right.
Many people love Mary. Most people love Mary Oliver. Mary always reads to me as bossing me around.
Okay.
Mary is the one who says, put down your pencil and go outside and look at the bees and look at the crickets and, live your life differently than you're living it. And I'm just like, no thanks, Mary.
I like my life.
Anyway, it's kind of sacrilegious to say that I don't like Mary Oliver, but I really don't like her. And I also don't like most of the poems in the New Yorker magazine. Because I think they are impossible to understand, kind of showing me that the poet is smarter than I am.
It's kind of like going to a museum and a canvas is huge on the wall and it just has a dot in the middle. It speaks to you like, you think I'm stupid? I mean, really? Who decided this was something we need to look at? And someone explained that to me once about why it's in there. To your point, the stuff in the New Yorker, that's like in the same group to me.
Yeah, I really am resistant and it irritates me.
Yeah.
I mean, I have quite a reaction to it. I don't like condescension. I don't like I'm smarter than you. What I like is we're all people and we all walk around with the same interior life and emotions.
Well, I'm more like you because as far as Mary Oliver, I would have gone outside, came back in, and my first line would be, I stepped on the cricket.
Sorry about your cricket, Mary. Maybe another draft.
What's one thing, and you probably already said it at the beginning, but what's one thing you hope listeners take away about poetry after hearing this episode?
I hope they take away that this is our DNA. We are all wired, as you and I have just done, to share our stories. To talk about our families, our parents, our dads, to talk about our feelings, to talk about when we're snarky or when we're insecure. We're meant to sit together and we're meant to speak it out loud and hear each other's breathing. So I think poetry has been overdressed, made way too fancy, too much makeup. It's our basic human need to connect.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Well, I agree with you. One of the things that I said before, and we mentioned you being a foodie. So do you like to do dinner parties and cook for somebody or people, or do you like to attend?
I used to like both very much. I did just have a birthday party here last night. As a matter of fact, it was a lot of work. It's become much more work than it used to feel like. And there is nothing I love more than sitting around a table with about 6 people having a fabulous conversation.
Right.
And, interactive and learning from each other and all of that. But I do find that that's a skill. Kind of conversation is a skill that not everybody has. Yeah. And, there are plenty of interactions that are just kind of like you would have with the person sitting next to you in the airplane.
Yeah. That's one thing I started before the podcast was with Magsy started is supper club. And most supper clubs in the South are the same couples, and everybody does it twice a year. But I really wanted to do where I'd meet all kinds of people on the island, and I do it with subscribers, email lottery. And so I get all kinds of people. And then I have the people who absolutely love it. And because they know I'm not an island time person, if you don't RSVP within 48 hours of you getting the email, I change the password and go on to the next group of people. And so I have people who are like me and they're hitting that subscribe button. And so I get a lot of half regulars, half new people every time I have an event. But one of the things you just said that I do miss from doing that is the ability for me to sit down and just to have a conversation with everybody, because that doesn't happen very often because I'm making sure everyone's getting their food and they're liking it and the whole thing. But I've been told the favorite part of my dinners is between dinner and dessert. I have everyone go around and say who they are, where they live on the island, what brought them here. And people over and over again say to me, that's my favorite part. Your food's good, great. But that's my favorite part because I get so many people who've moved here and it's hard to meet people here on this island. And so they're able to see there's other people like them and have conversations. And my last one I just did probably had the most conversation with everybody as I did a Korean barbecue where everyone cooked their own food on the little, tabletop, stovetops and cooked their own food. And it almost got raucous, because it was they were having a good time. Yeah. Everyone was getting to talk and that type of thing. So yeah, I agree with you.
Well, it's got everything. It's got the fire, it's got the community, and it's got the stories. What's not to love?
What's not to love?
Yeah.
So what's one of your favorite foods to eat or make?
I love my mother's enchiladas, and so I make those. I'm oh my gosh, it would be easier to tell you what I don't like. Because I love most things. I don't like liver.
Me neither.
I don't like lima beans. And I can't eat any raw fish. I know that's really unchic. You're supposed to eat sushi. Yeah. People who love it.
Yeah.
But I don't. So that's about it though.
Okay.
Oysters. Another thing.
Yeah, I'm down on that.
Yeah.
I have made grilled oysters now from having the supper club with toppings. I do like them that way or in a gumbo because they're cooked. But I can't eat them raw like that either. It's a textural thing for me.
So that's about it, though.
Yeah.
Anything else? Somebody said that I'm a freegan, which is I eat anything that's free.
I didn't know where that was going, but that's funny. So people now, this podcast is now a food channel.
Yeah,
Just
right.
kidding. Well, thank you so much. I really enjoy speaking with you.
And thank you for your really provocative questions.
Oh,
I've thought a lot about these, and I will continue to.
Yeah, that's one of the things that I'm proud of that I get from people. Like, these are good questions. Last week, he already came up with Robert De Laurentiis from the airport, and he's had hundreds of interviews because he's flown around the world and set world records and things like that. But he said the same thing. He said, I love your thoughtful questions. So I'm proud of that, doing that, and it's worth it, Okay.
No, you did a great job.
Thank you so much.
Yeah.